Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Knoll, and welcome back once again to another edition of the movie Battleground. And tonight we have a number one contenders match for you guys. Amaru Moses, quite honestly, he's looking a lot like Henry Sanchez did last year. He ascended to that throne, and he does not look like he's going to come down anytime soon. And again, continuing the trend we've had this year of there hasn't yet this year been a repeat contender. And we have two new people that are stepping up. One obviously has been there before, but he's been out of the game for a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. It is, of course, Joe Farrelly taking on Noah McCausland, both going on good runs as of recently. Noah picking up the wins required to be here that were put in front of him, including beating Medee in his last match. Joe gets here from his tournament run last year that he had, where he made it all the way to the finals. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we were unable to have him participate for the first part of the year. However, I'm not one to punish people because at the end of the day, this is a side gig for everybody. I don't expect you to put this first in any instance. So while Joe didn't get the title match or get to say he was the winner of the tournament, that was bestowed to Jay because he was the one who didn't back out, the most basic way to put it. Joe does get to keep his chance to play for that contendership, and he is back with us here now, over 6 months since his last match, ready to take that on. But if there's anyone who could pull that off, it's going to be Joe. We'll talk to him in a minute, but first we're going to bring in his opponent, coming in with a record of 6 wins, 4 defeats, and 1 knockout. He is Noah McLovin McCausland. Noah, welcome, sir. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm confident. I feel like people come in saying, "Oh, it's Joe." I'm nervous to play him. Obviously, I'm going nervous to play any match. Like, you always want to win, right? But I feel confident. I feel confident in my prep. I know Joe's a great competitor. If I remember correctly, I gave him a run for his money the last time we played, and I gave Rue a run for his money the last time we played. So even though I've come out of losses with both of those, I feel confident that I can maybe change it up this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing is, so your record is sort of similar to when we had Austin step up as a contender last time, where you look at it and you go 6-4. Now with his, it was a little more obvious, right? Because he has all those knockouts. You can go, okay, sure, I see where this has come from. Now, we've talked before, right? You had a rough run of it when you first joined the league, where your first 2 losses way back when in 2021 were both knockout losses. Since that second knockout loss, you have gone 5-2 with 1 knockout, and your only 2 losses in the league have been, as you mentioned, to Joe, former 2-time champion, and to Amaru, current champion, defended twice. That's not a bad person to lose to, and certainly you've had wins even since that loss against Joe to further build yourself up. So does that do anything for your confidence, or do you have to sort of keep yourself grounded?
It does help with the confidence, but at the same time, this is someone I've lost against, so I have to humble myself and not get too cocky.
Right.
Go and just play smart and don't underestimate him. So.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and sit you in the back and bring in your opponent, coming in with a record of 8 wins, 2 defeats, and 3 knockouts. He is the former 2-time champion of the movie Battleground and the 2022 tournament finalist, making his return, Joe Hot Fuzz Farrelly. Joe, welcome back to the Battleground, sir. It's good to have you here. Of course, you've had a longer layoff, maybe even with the exception of when the show was actually shut down. I think that's probably a longer period of time. But with that said, you're coming back off a break immediately into a match like this. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel good, but Noah hit the nail on the head. He did give me a run for my money last time. That was a hell of a debate, and it came down to the wire. I think tonight is a return for me. I think there was a point, I'd got to where I think I was getting a little bit careless with it, not prepping as hard as I should have done. Maybe not, maybe thinking in my head, I've seen that movie and not bothering to revisit it, when you can learn quite a lot from a revisit, I think. And I've definitely put a lot more work into this. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. And it is good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about what shifted for you, because obviously you still have to win tonight before this becomes your top priority. But the last time you were in the league, Henry was the champion. Henry was the person you were kind of shooting your aim towards. And now it's somebody who, quite frankly, you're just a lot closer to in general in Amaru. Does that change things for you, or does it make you more excited even to play somebody potentially when you get there, if you get there tonight, that you know more?
It kind of does a little bit. Look, Henry beat me fair and square, but at the end of the day, I don't hold anything personal against the people that beat me. For me, it's about, I enjoy doing this, but secondly, it's, I'd like the title back. Who took it from me is irrelevant. And yes, there is something sweet about playing Amaru because we do get on very well. I am very close with Amaru in this community. And the last time we debated, there was a time we debated, and I think it just came down to who was quicker off the draw with a speed round choice. That was the level we were talking about. And it's always good fun. And yeah. Who doesn't like being on a stream with Rue?
I'd have him on more if he wasn't champion, and that seemed cheap. But with that said,
he's got one got stay to run.
He's busy. He's busy doing other things. If this is everybody else's side gig, I'm his side gig, like for real. So go ahead and bring Noah back in, guys. Let's jump into this. This is a number 1 contenders match, which means it is a best of 5 rounds. First to 3 points wins. That is still the same. If a competitor picks up the first 3 points in a row, that will be a victory by knockout. However, if after 4 rounds it is tied 2-2, you do not have to worry about the blind round. You instead get the speed round, which we'll talk about should we have to go to it. In terms of the first 4 questions, though, this will be the same as always. You get 60-second opening argument, 2-minute solo expansion, a 4-minute open debate, and a 60-second closing argument, of which you've had the chance to prep for. After that, I have 3 judges backstage in the form of Chris, Austin, and Nick. They will join us on screen, and based off of the arguments you guys have made, we'll deliberate who gets the point. With all that said, guys, are we ready to go?
Good luck, Joe. Let's do this.
Good luck, man.
Let's give him a show at least,
So we'll go ahead and hop into this, and I always like to be, whenever we make some sort of adjustment or change, it doesn't really fucking matter, to the show, I always like to be upfront about it because I think it makes the stakes a little more interesting. And this match behind the scenes was a first. This was the first time that I ever had to reject both initial choices for a strength that the competitors submitted. Somehow we made it 150 plus fucking matches where I haven't had to do it, but it happened this time because these guys are so hyper specific in where they want to go with their strengths that I still technically gave it to them anyways. I just gave them both. I didn't tell them that. They got their questions. They answered, but I gave them both. Because you know what? They're playing for a title match. It's a number 1 contenders match. It's a rematch. Fuck it. Let's have some fun. With that said, something that a lot of people, especially if you're fans of the franchise, have on the mind right now is Doctor Who. I believe the gentleman's name is Shuti Gatwa. They just announced more information about his upcoming season. I know it's coming later this year, I believe. Is that correct?
You got some stuff with this guy coming back first, but
right, okay, it's Tennant, right? They brought back first.
Yeah, he's coming in later.
My personal favorite doctor.
So and this guy is like on the edge of success right now. Obviously, Sex Education on Netflix was a huge hit. He is in the upcoming film Barbie. Actually, by the time this releases, Barbie may be in theaters already. I forget, but Barbie, he is in it as one of the many Kens, and while not all Doctor Who's have had successful film careers, a good number of them have, and certainly it can be a launching point for your career. Actually, because he wasn't picked, I'll use David Tennant as an example. I feel like that show really did do a lot for him in terms of finding bigger roles and success. And so with that said, the question is, which Doctor Who has had the best film career overall? Now, I should state this is not any sort of specific time period of their career. You can include anything from their career. It's just overall which Doctor Who is best known or has the best film career. With that said, behind the scenes, Joe, you do have the higher record, so you were deemed the favorite in this match. You chose to go first on all of our odd questions tonight. Noah, you're going to go first on all the evens. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in your guys' timer. I'm going to wish you both the best of luck on what is sure to be an awesome match. And Joe, your time will start when you begin speaking.
It's important to remember that we are arguing which actor has had the best overall film career. And for me, that is someone who has appeared in a variety of roles, given solid performances, but more importantly, has been in great movies. For me, that's Peter Capaldi. First of all, He's in both Paddington movies. That's already tipping the scales quite high. The argument should really begin and end there, if I'm honest. But this is a debate, and I'm going to put some weight behind my argument. I think Capaldi himself is a fantastic character actor. But when you look at the movies he's been in The Loop, The Suicide Squad, World War Z, Dangerous Liaisons, Christopher Robin, I think it shows that he always picks the right roles. And these movies have all been successful. They've all done well. And ones that haven't done well, like World War Z, there's still people crying out for sequels to these movies. And I think that's why, overall, he's had the best film career.
And that will be time. I just realized I didn't have the correct mic input put in, so I hope that sounds a bit better. I had no idea what I sounded like before. With that said, Noah, over to you. Time starts when you begin speaking.
I give credit where credit is due, and where my opponent has a good choice, and they may have a good actor, but nothing compares to my actor and his filmography. The volume alone is enough to make this an obvious choice. But when you take into account that my actor has been in the running for decades and has had a film career for decades, and they've had a lot of notable work. Midnight Express, the 1978 version of Lord of the Rings, Alien, The Elephant Man, History of the World Part 1, 1984, Spaceballs, Contact, Harry Potter, Hellboy, V for Vendetta, Indiana Jones, the bad one, Melancholia, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Snowpiercer, and yes, you know him. It's the late, great John Hurt. Who else?
And that is time. All right, Peter Capaldi versus John Hurt. I'm going to give a shout out real quick to Matt Smith, not because he's had an incredible film career, but because I feel horrible for the film career that he's had. No one deserves to be in both Terminator Genesis and Morbius. With that said, Joe, back over to you for better films when you're ready.
So in terms of the choices we had, you had someone like Patrick Troughton, whose probably best film role is in The Omen. You had someone like Tom Baker, who unfortunately is probably best film role is Dungeons and Dragons, the original one. Never mind. Paul McGann, someone who was, with Nail and I, that's fantastic. Christopher Eccleston, of course, is another very strong choice in his film career. But I think when you're looking at which actors had the best overall career, you have to balance the hits versus the misses. And I think when you look at Peter Capaldi's work, yes, some early roles are in some films that are not so great, but everything sort of post sort of maybe mid-90s, 2000 pretty much sits at over the average on an IMDb rating. I think that's the key thing here. And then you look at some of the films he's chosen, especially as we move on in his career, showing that his career is advancing. Things like the Paddington movies or In the Loop, reprising his role as the great Malcolm Tucker from The Thick of It. You look at The Suicide Squad. Movies like this, it just shows that the career is just on a trajectory of getting better and better and better. When you're looking at an actor's overall career, you do have to look at the misses as well. And with the misses, with Capaldi, it seems to be a lot earlier in the career when he's still building that name, building that reputation. When you have an actor who has over 200 credits to his name, there's going to be a lot of misses. Yes, there are some hits in there, but I think when you look at the misses as well, things like 1978's Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, these are bad movies. But it's not just the bad, it's also the forgettable. You look around Peter Capaldi's career and you don't find much forgettable in there. There's the early roles, but the more stuff that comes up, the things like Dangerous Liaisons, Christopher Robin, World War Z, and the Paddington movies, stuff like that, they are more memorable, and I think that makes it a better overall career because there's less misses and there's less forgettables in there. And I think that's the key thing in terms of arguing who's had the best overall career.
And time. All right, Noah, back over to you when ready.
Not only does John Hurt have so many credits, but he always puts in an amazing effort into every role. He has an incredible range from going to a warm, kind, gentle wand-keeper in Harry Potter to being this totalitarian dictator that looms over V for Vendetta. He specifically, in that role, makes sure to not blink when he was on camera, to show that. He has been known by the masses for literal decades. He has 2 Oscar noms for Elephant Man and Midnight Express and 22 other award wins. Peter Capaldi is a fine actor, but no one really knew who he was before Doctor Who or really after. He has 3 acting credits before Doctor Who that are moderately recognizable: World War Z, Paddington 1 and 2. Most of his resume are just series and TV movies. He has a handful of films, and even less than that are notable. He may have won an Oscar, but it hasn't even been for a feature film, so it doesn't mean anything for the argument. John Hurt has been around for decades in not only British film, but world film. Because of the number of just recognizable films alone and the performances in those films, John Hurt is the clear winner. Even in recognizable movies that Capaldi is in, like you said, Suicide Squad, like you said, Paddington 1 and 2, actors like John Hurt, the main villain like Starro, literally everyone else in the Suicide Squad outshines Peter Capaldi at every turn. He's forgettable. He doesn't have a memorable performance, but John Hurt has a memorable performance in almost every single movie. You're saying that he has a lot of hits, or he has a lot of misses and some of them are forgettable. The fact that it still makes a great career. You still learn from your losses. You still learn from your mistakes. And the fact that he has over 200 credits, 200 acting credits, a lot of them are film credits. Whereas yours, you can count how many movie credits Peter Capaldi has on his hand. Other than that, it's just series and TV films and all that kind of stuff. John Hurt's film career has thrived for decades. Thrived.
And time. All right, we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion period. That said, the timer will start kick up when you guys are ready. First person to speak starts it.
So I think you're maybe confusing sheer volume for being the best. I think if you've maybe 200 movie credits and you've listed maybe 10%, and I think that's the only stuff that you can actually truly argue is a success. You look at other stuff like his small appearance in Spaceballs, one of Mel Brooks' worst movies. You've got things like Valiant, The Black Cauldron, the Oxford Murders. These are the stuff that make up the majority of John Hurt's career, and that's why he cannot have the best film career. It's a sheer massive volume. Yes, he's worked hard. Yes, he's got a lot of work, but he has not had that success with all those movies. In general terms, it's a 10% success rate.
When you have over 200 films, obviously not everyone is going to be a success rate, and it's more than 10%. He has so many films in his repertoire, it's hard to name only 10. He has such great performances in everything he does, and he's recognizable in everything he does. Even non-film people are like, "Oh, I know that guy. He's the wand keeper from Harry Potter." I understand.
He's been in 200 films.
Yeah, I understand. You're saying that just because volume doesn't mean it has a greater film career. Agreeable, but it's a point in his favor. Obviously, he's going to have a lot more misses than Peter Capaldi does, but just because he's done more stuff. I think he has way better movies than Peter Capaldi does.
But I think there's also a difference. I think you've got to look at the terms in like how long one has been acting, and that's the thing. You actually look at the credits, you take the choices that they make as an actor. I want to be in this, I want to be part of this. And even directors reaching out saying, I want that person to be in this, whether it be for a voice role like Christopher Robin, whether it be for, the sort of side neighbor that doesn't really get on like Paddington, or you put him in something where he is the main villain controlling the evil creature in the Suicide Squad. All these sort of things, they point to someone who is building their career, building and building and building, but making the right choices as they do so. Whereas John Hurt, he built that career early, and now it's about sheer work. That is to be commended, but it doesn't lead to an overall best film career.
Peter Capaldi has been in the game almost as long as John Hurt. If I'm looking correctly, it's around 1980s is when he got his start. Granted, John Hurt got his in the 60s, but still, like I've said, you go on IMDb and almost a majority, almost 90%, 85% of Peter Capaldi's work is just TV shows and TV movies.
But in terms of his film career, those films have all been great. Those films have all been great. Even the films have been great. Even the films have been great,
but he doesn't have that memorable performance. He's not a memorable part of those movies. Like I said, it's Hugh Grant in those movies. It's Nicole Kidman in Paddington. It's going to be everyone else in the Suicide Squad. You're not watching it for Peter Capaldi.
but this is about who's had the best film career, not who's necessarily given the most standout performances. I think you look at John Hurt's IMDb, and that's great. Forgettable. Oh, he was in that. Oh, I've never heard of that film. Never had. Oh, that's great. Oh, never heard of that film. Never heard of that film. Sucks. He's in the worst Indiana Jones movie. He's in the worst Middle Earth movie. He's a small part of the Harry Potter movies. He has, he's given these voice performances. He's in one of the worst Mel Brooks movies. He gives voice performances that are forgettable, like Lord of the Rings, like Valiant, like The Black Cauldron. I think, you're looking at.
But it's the fact that he's done it. Hercules it's the fact that he's done it. He has those credits. He has those. Peter Capaldi has what, 8 movie credits? 10, maybe at most. John Hurt has over 200.
But they're all highs. You got to you're looking at an overall career. You have to take the highs versus the lows. And with 200 films, you're inevitably going to have those forgettable movies, and you're going to have those misses.
All right, that is time. We're going to go into the 1-minute closings. Joe, you're up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
When looking at whose career is the best overall, you have to look at the lows as well as the highs. Where Capaldi's highs climb just as high as Hurt's, because look at the ratings that Paddington 2 gets. This is Pedro Pascal's third favorite movie. But with over 200 credits to his name, it's inevitable that John Hurt would have lows and just plain forgettable movies. And that justifies the fact that he does not have a better overall career than Capaldi. Capaldi's early career may contain some bad movies, but that's the early career when you're getting yourself established. But his later career has shone. Hurt continued to make bad movies well into the twilight of his career, and it absolutely cannot be argued that someone who appeared in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull has had a better career than someone who was in Paddington 2. You just cannot. When you look at those highs, the sheer volume of John Hurt's performances, John Hurt's roles, add up to too many misses, too many lows, whereas Peter Capaldi's limited acting career, which is still growing, has had highs.
And time. All right. Over to you, Noah, when ready.
When you have over 200 acting credits, you are going to have misses. The fact that Peter Capaldi has about as many movies as John Hurt great movies is not a great thing for Peter Capaldi. John Hurt has a better film career, 1, because he has so many acting credits, 2, because his performances are always spot on, and 3, because he's been in a lot of good movies like Alien, like Harry Potter, Elephant Man, The Midnight Express. He was nominated, for 2 Oscars. 2 Oscars. Peter Capaldi hasn't been nominated for any film Oscars. Peter Capaldi is forgettable, and he plays sideline forgettable characters in the films that you're talking about, in these good films that you're talking about. He's not the one you're watching for. When it comes to Elephant Man, when it comes to Midnight Express, you're watching for John Hurt. And when you watch Harry Potter, you'll be like, oh, that's John Hurt. When you watch Aliens, that's John Hurt. He has better movies, and he has more movies.
And time. All right, guys. Excellent start there. I'm going to go ahead and put you both in the back, and we're going to bring forth the judges here. Well, I go ahead and give the judges a moment to make up their final minds here. We'll go through some quick fact checks. So in terms of actual career size, the numbers that were read, I believe by both competitors, but at the very least I heard at least each number once. IMDb does not separate TV from film in their credits, so the numbers were overall credits. However, I had a lot of time back here because these guys, great, perfect, no notes. So I had time to count. If my counting is correct, John Hurt has about 140 film credits, give or take. I may have missed some here or there. Peter Capaldi currently has 31. It's also worth noting that John Hurt's film career at the very least, started about 2 decades before Capaldi's did, although Hurt did pass away back in 2017. His last film was 2018, whereas Capaldi is still acting, so I don't know, give or take there. But that's about, again, the point is he does have vastly more films, not quite 200 though. In terms of talking about the highs and the lows of their career, I simply just went to Rotten Tomatoes because it's the quickest consensus grabber in terms of what people think. Both actors actually do have a film that received 100% approval rating from critics. Capaldi was in the film Local Hero back in 1983. I don't know how big a role he has, but it does receive 100%. And in 1994, John Hurt was in the film Second Best. In terms of their next highest ranked films, John Hurt was in films that all received 90%, such as Alien, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Snowpiercer, and The Elephant Man. Peter Capaldi also has a few films at that 90% approval rating, including both the Paddington films, Dangerous Liaisons, and In the Loop. So clearly, both have had, and I'm not going to bother reading the films because you've never heard of them, but both also had films in the single digits of approval rating from critics. So the point is, critically, they're about even there in terms of where people rank their films and what they think of them. With that said, the judges do look ready, so I've killed more than enough time. Chris, I'll go to you first, as concise as you can get it for me. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point of the round?
This was difficult overnight to have the Wood Doctor versus the Tough Doctor, but I went with Noah Strangely in the end. I think he just pointed out Peter Capaldi had a limited career with John Hurt had a role that he recognized. Even the bad movie, he stand out the most, and I think him arguing the side of him arguing that John Hurt, even in the bad movie, despite some I did agree with, stand out more than Peter Capaldi. But both still.
All right, Austin, down to you. Same question.
Yeah, I'm kind of on a similar train as far as I think Noah really sold me a lot as far as really John Hurt being a film guy overall and being one of those guys you recognize of like, hey, I know that guy. And, even if it's a kind of a mid film, you know him, you remember his face, you remember his performance. And he really hammered on the Peter Capaldi that even in some of those movies that Joe mentioned, you don't necessarily even know it's Peter Capaldi or remember him in those movies. So I think Noah just really hammered the movie point. So I'll go with Noah this one.
All right. Nick, happy to have you here, sir. We'll hear from you on the next round for certain. Otherwise, the rules are broken. But till then, I'm going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back, and we will go ahead and jump into question number 2 as we'll bring these guys back in. And we are going to move on to a director who I personally am actually quite fond of. And this is just an instance where sometimes a director is so artistic that it may take a while for them to make enough films. Because for people who don't know, when it comes to selecting a strength, there is actually a qualification. A director has to have at least 6 films in their filmography. The math in my head is if you evenly divide it, take out like thoughts on the films. If you evenly divide it, that's 3 choices for each competitor to pick from. It feels like a nice even number that gives a good selection of films. But what that means is sometimes these critically acclaimed directors, look at Ben Affleck, who just had a hit with Air. He's at 5 films. Damien Chazelle, if you count the film that nobody's seen he made back in 2009, he's also only at 5 films. So this qualification does lock out certain directors. And one of those guys is a director named Derek Cianfrance, who most people know for directing Blue Valentine back in the early 2010s, a movie that broke most people who were of a similar age at that time. I personally have always loved The Place Beyond the Pines. I think it's an excellent film. But with that said, the question is, because he is known specifically for his bigger films for having romantic leads at the center of it, he also wrote Sound of Metal, which of course obviously more focused on someone like Riz Ahmed, but of course there is a couple at the center of that story. So the question is, which 2 actors should play the romantic leads in Derek Cianfrance's next film? Now, again, in terms of setting up the question, there's no barometer on what that film has to be. They also weren't required to pitch a film, so don't hold or expect that against the competitors. They're simply pitching why the actors should be the leads. With that said, Noah, you are up first on this one, so I'll throw up the timer on screen, and we'll get started when ready.
Ryan Gosling has starred in 2 of Derek Cianfrance's, or however Aaron said it, most known films, and one of the romantic leads in both of them. He has been known to be the main romantic lead in a lot of films. It only makes sense that Gosling be one of the choices for this question. The other choice is just as clear. Out of all the actresses he has shared the screen with, there's no one that, when together, have just oozed chemistry with him, and that is Emma Stone. Emma Stone has always brought her easy A, witty, smart, and funny type of character and style to her roles. You can see it in Amazing Spider-Man and La La Land and Crazy Stupid Love. Ryan Gosling plays off of her so well. But in a Derek, San France movie, you have that tragedy, you have unfortunate events happen, and so you can tone down Emma Stone, but you have Ryan Gosling to support her and back her up and be there for her.
That is time. For what it's worth, I'm saying it as I've heard other people say it. Before the end of this round, I will figure out how the fuck he actually says his own name. With that said, Joe, back over to you. What's your pick?
Derek Cianfrance has a very interesting filmography, and The Place Beyond the Pines is the standout for me. But when looking at who should play romantic leads in his next movie, I think you want to give the audience something new. And you want to give opportunities to actors who are both in very interesting places in their career, not newbies by any stretch, but people who have shown serious acting chops, have had leading roles, not necessarily together, roles that have included romance, but have shown very wide ranges to both their abilities. And for me, I think the people I would like to see taking on these roles are Riz Ahmed and Jodie Comer. I think both of these performers are in a very strong place in their career. They've both shown that they can do the drama, they can do romance, they can lead. And I think it's a very exciting time to be either of those people.
All right, that is time. I did figure out how he says it. That's what I did in the last minute. So per his mouth, it is pronounced Cianfrance. So somewhere in the middle, we were all partially correct. With that said, Noah, I'll go over to you. Time starts. By the way, I'm not expecting either of you to worry about pronouncing it correctly. Just, that's another trick in your head you don't need. With that said, Noah, you got 2 minutes on the clock already.
Gosling and Emma Stone just pair so well together in romantic movies as romantic leads. And in terms of seeing something new, we put Emma Stone in a Cianfrance. I immediately forgot how to say it, in a Cianfrance movie. And you see her kind of toned down from her usual witty self, but she's still very charming. She's still very interesting to watch chemistry-wise with Ryan Gosling. You see it. But in this film, you tone her down, you give her some tragedy, more than you see in La La Land, because I wouldn't consider that a tragedy. And you see what she can do. You really see what she can do. So you get something new with that relationship, other than Crazy Stupid Love, other than La La Land. But with Riz Ahmed and Jodie Comer, they might be good together. We don't know. We have not seen them together at all. And when it comes, you can take great actors and put them together, and for somehow they just have horrible chemistry. And it's untested. They could be good together. We just don't know. I mean, Jodie Comer, the romantic lead in Free Guy, it's mainly just Ryan Reynolds, funny enough, another Ryan, that is having it elevates that chemistry, because anyone can have chemistry with Ryan Reynolds, because that part's easy. He has chemistry with everybody. And Riz Ahmed, he was great in Sound of Metal. He was amazing, but it wasn't because of his romance with Olivia Cooke. That was such a small part of that movie. His performance was all about losing his hearing and struggling to cope with losing his first love, music, not romance. So they haven't been truly tested in a romance. They could be great together, but they could also be very horrible. But we know that Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are great together. And because they're so great together, Ryan Gosling can ground her and guide her, but she can also be toned down and show us something new in Derek Cianfrance's movie.
And time. All right. Joe, back over to you when ready.
I think the reason you want to cast, firstly, an actor like, let's go with Riz Ahmed first. Riz Ahmed, yes, The Sound of Metal was about him losing a love that wasn't actually a person, it was his music, but he still showed it's that desire, it's that caring, it's that passion, something that you always bring to a romance, whether it be something, a person, or something more abstract or physical. Then you look at Jodie Comer, and I'm going to highlight her performance in The Last Duel, because The Last Duel is a very interesting film, and it gives her so much different things to do, because it's told in the style that it's told in, giving her, the way the other characters perceive her. With Adam Driver sees her as being very flirty, and she carries that really well, and it's believable. You believe each different take she does it. Her performance with Matt Damon, which is that loving relationship, and the fact is she's going up against actors like Driver, like Affleck, like Matt Damon, and she holds her own. She stands out. She's the standout of that movie, and she basically plays 3 different roles, one of them being romantic, one of them being very flirty and very passionate. I think that's a very key thing. I think the issue you have with casting actors like Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone is it's frankly lazy. And if there's one thing that Derek Cianfrance is not, it's lazy. You look at that filmography, movies like Blue Valentine, The Place Beyond the Pines, The Light Between Oceans, all these movies are challenging their actors to give something new. You get with Michael Fassbender in like The Light Between Oceans and The Place Beyond the Pines, Blue Valentine, like these movies, they're all very different sorts of couples and they're all very different sorts of performances. One thing that Cianfrance does is he doesn't play it by the numbers. I think Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, you've had them perform together in Gangster Squad, you've had them perform together in La La Land and in Crazy Stupid Love. And Crazy Stupid Love is the best of those. And it's the best of their chemistry. And it was 12 years ago. All right. La La Land, it feels too forced, it feels too wooden. But when you get to the point with like Crazy Stupid Love, that is the best of their chemistry together. And they're a side romance story. Steve Carell is still the lead of that movie, and it's about him exploring that relationship. And I think that's the different thing. Whereas Riz Ahmed and Jodie Comer have that chemistry and they can bring it together.
And time. All right, we're going to get into the 4-minute open discussion. Timer starts back up when the first competitor speaks.
You're saying it's going to be lazy to cast Stone and Gosling when his movies are all about challenging actors and getting something new from them. And that's exactly what I'm proposing goes on when you cast these two. You cast Emma Stone and you have her in this tragic role in this story, and you have Gosling there to ground her and to guide her as a fellow actor through it. He's been with Derek. I'm going to call him Derek. He's been with Derek for 2 movies now. He can help guide her, and she is going to be giving us something new. Derek is going to guide her and challenge her to be a better actor and give us something we haven't seen before. But the fact that those two have chemistry together and the fact that it's been proven and we love to see it every time proves that they should be casted.
I think Emma Stone has moved on from having romantic relationships in movies with Ryan Gosling. She has much stronger romantic relationship with Olivia Colman in The Favourite. I think that's a stronger performance from there. I think Emma Stone has moved on from that. And frankly, I quite think audiences have moved on from it. All right, we've seen it. We've seen it with Crazy Stupid Love. We've seen it with La La Land. I think we need to give the audience something a little bit new. And 2 actors.
But it never gets old every time we see it.
It does get old. Even in La La Land, it was getting old. All right. The fact of the matter is, Gosling has steered clear of the romantic lead since La La Land. You look at his roles, the roles he's been in since La La Land, none of them are as a romantic lead. He's moved on from that, and Emma Stone's moved on to girls, which is fantastic for her.
Well, look at Barbie. Barbie's coming out. You're telling me he's not going to have a romantic lead with Margot Robbie?
We don't know how good that's going to be. Like I said, we don't know what that's going to be like yet. But
we don't know how that's going to be. That's crazy because we don't know how Jodie Comer and how Riz Ahmed are going to be together because they haven't been together. You're giving no reason.
It's still more exciting for an audience. It's still more exciting given something they've seen 3 times already.
But the fact is you're not giving any reason. You're not giving any reason why they should be connected together. There's no reason why you're pairing them together, why they should be together.
Because they're 2 actors at the height of their career right now who are both giving great performances. One who has shown that he can lead and he can be nominated for being lead, and that he can also show that passion and translate that passion, whether it be for something abstract or a person, and he still has that romantic part of him with another person in The Sound of Metal. And that shows that he knows how to work with Derek Cianfrance. And then you have Jodie Comer, who in The Last Duel, which is a fantastic performance where she outshines Affleck, she outshines Damon, she outshines Driver, and she's doing it in this way that shows 2 completely different sides of a romantic interest, whether one being reciprocated, one not being reciprocated. And I think that's an interesting thing that she can play off. And I'm saying that these are 2 actors. We're not just going to keep casting romantic movies with people. They never acted together. No, we won't cast them. We would never have got any romantic movies in the first place if we had an attitude like that.
Well, the movies that you're saying, we have one performance by Riz Ahmed that's amazing. I can't think of another from him. And you're saying that Jodie Comer was great in The Last Duel. I haven't seen it, so I can't say that. But does she have any chemistry? Does she have any chemistry with anyone in The Last Duel? Does Riz Ahmed have? Does that chemistry outperform his performance? You're captivated by Riz Ahmed's performance in Sound of Metal, not his relationship. In Crazy Stupid Love, you're captured by Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling's relationship. And La La Land, you're captured by it.
This is not maybe not his relationship with another person, but his relationship with music. Absolutely. You think an actor can't translate those two things? A passion for a person with a passion for something abstract. Like I said, but Jodie Comer, yes, she has that chemistry. She has that chemistry with Adam Driver in the scenes that are from Adam Driver's perspective, where he thinks she's being flirty when she's actually not, but it's from his perspective. So she gets to have that flirty performance. With Matt Damon, there's that long-established relationship, the tiredness, but also the love is still there. And I think that's a really amazing thing to get, especially with someone so seasoned as Matt Damon and someone who's fresh coming into the thing as Jodie Comer. I think that's the signs of a great actress coming up, whereas audiences are sick of Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone.
And time. All right, we're gonna go back over to yourself, back over to Noah for the 1 minute closing. With that said, time starts when you begin speaking.
I would love for Joe to give me evidence why audiences are sick of seeing Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone together. And just give me a reason. They are incredible together. It's tried and true every single time. They have this undeniable chemistry. You can't shake it. That some actors just don't have. You could have these great actors and pair them together, and they just don't have any chemistry together. You see it all the time. There's no reason why you should be bringing Riz Ahmed and Jodie Comer together. There's no connection that Joe is bringing to the table here. With what I'm suggesting, Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling together in Derek's movie. Derek is going to be getting something different out of Emma Stone that we've seen before. He's going to be getting this darker, this more tragic side out of her in this film. And Ryan Gosling is going to be there as a fellow actor to support her because he's been with Derek before. He knows how he works. It's tried and true. It works every time. We have no reason why Jodie Comer and Riz Ahmed should be together.
And time. All right, and then Joe, back over to you. Final minute when ready.
So on the one hand, you have a tried, tested, but frankly yawn-inducing suggestion of putting Gosling and Stone back as romantic leads. On the other hand, you have two apex actors, both coming off incredible performances, one of which was working with CM France. You haven't given the opportunity, they haven't necessarily given the opportunity to really shine in a romantic lead. They've shown signs of what they can do in movies, but with a romantic subplot, and now the chance for them to really show what they can do and give an audience something they haven't necessarily seen before. But sure, in an age of nostalgia bait, let's go with Gosling and Stone. Noah even said it himself. He wants something different out of them. You don't want to cast different actors, but you want to make the actors do something different. So why not just cast different actors? I think that's the benefit of casting actors like Ahmed and Comer, because they can do that. This is Derek C. and France we're talking about. Yes, Gosling and Stone might be fine as in a romantic movie, but not a Derek C. and France romantic movie. And I think that's the key here. Derek C. and France always challenges his audiences. It's always brought something different to the table. You look through it, it's from always something different. So that's what we need to give the audience.
And time. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit both of you in the back. We'll bring the judges forward here. All right, so in terms of fact-checking, the thing that sort of came up the most, as I give you guys time to make your decision, was it discussing specifically the different romance partnerships that these different actors have had in film. So I decided to do that research and just sort of look at it and say, okay, since the films that are being referenced, what have these actors done? So when it comes to Emma Stone and La La Land, this was in the context of since La La Land, what have they done? For what it's worth, Ryan Gosling has only been in 4 films since. Barbie would be the 5th film that he's done since 2016, with a 4-year gap in there as well. But however, while you could argue that some of these are not explicitly romance films, Song to Song, Blade Runner 2049, and First Man all certainly have a romance at the center or as a major part of their respective stories. And I guess Barbie counts as well. So he has done romance. Emma Stone most certainly did give an, I believe, Academy nominated, if I'm remembering that correctly, performance as a lesbian love interest in The Favorite. However, she has technically done straight romances as well. She reprised her roles in 2 sequels, Zombieland Double Tap and The Croods: A New Age, both of which do have romances at the center of them. I'm not saying they're heavy romances, but they're romances. In terms of Riz Ahmed, his romances have come in, of all places, animated films. The animated film Weathering with You and the American dub of the animated documentary Flea, both of which have romances at the center. He was the star of both of those. So he did it through voice work. And then Jodie Comer only has 2 real films on her CV right now, Free Guy and The Last Duel. I wouldn't call anything in The Last Duel romance, but certainly depending on the perspective that you're watching in that film, there is actors playing off each other. And of course, we already talked about Free Guy in depth in that debate, so I'm not going to bother covering it. With that said, our judges look ready here. So Austin, I'll go to you. Who gets your vote and what was the main selling point?
Yeah, this was fairly close. A lot of it came down to the back and forth round for me. But man, to me, Noah had some brutal counters to Joe's stuff in that one. The Barbie counter was a damn near knockout counter, like coming right off the bat. And Joe didn't. Noah really hammered that Joe didn't really sell like the Riz and Jody thing. Like, why, other than their most recent film, they should team together? I didn't really hear a lot about that. Noah really sold me about these guys really working with the director, getting something new. Noah just had the broader argument for me and hit a lot more points, so it goes to Noah.
Okay, Nick, down to you.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, and for a lot of different reasons. I think that Noah just kind of came in really hot with the you don't know if they have chemistry argument, and that can actually sink a romantic performance. And I think the Barbie counter in the back and forth round really kind of did clinch it for him. So, yeah, Noah.
All right. Judges, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back. We'll go ahead and jump into question number 3. And we're jumping into someone who, just my own personal opinion, I'm not going to say they're like an all-time classic director, but maybe one of my favorite directors over the last couple of years. Guy Ritchie has seen this weird renaissance in his career after bombing hard with King Arthur and making an okay movie with Aladdin. We've seen The Gentleman, Wrath of Man, Operation Fortune, which probably no one saw earlier this year based on its box office numbers. And you saw it was good. It was surprisingly good. I enjoyed it. And The Covenant, which was a lot better, also came out this year. He is having a bit of a comeback. So with that said, when the man is on the rise, it is my job as the host of an internet show he will never watch to take a shit on him. The question is, what is Guy Ritchie's most overrated film? A director with more critical acclaim than you may expect. What is his most overrated film? With that said, Joe, this is going to turn back over to you. So when you are ready, the timer will start for you.
Guy Ritchie for me is a great director. I think he did start, he has always gone back to what he knows, which is that British crime movie with the phenomenal Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and then Snatch, and then the less said about Swept Away, the better. But he came back. No one's going to argue that Swept Away is overrated. I'll tell you that for free. He came back with more crime, more British crime, but in a different way with Sherlock Holmes. New twist on the British crime for him. But for me, his most overrated is tough, because I think most people reach the same consensus when it comes to Guy Ritchie movies. I don't think there's a lot of back and forth on it. But for me, I think his most overrated is Wrath of Man. I think the reason people put this in the great category, great Guy Ritchie movies. But I think the issue with Wrath of Man is just another one of these revenge movies in the vein of Taken, John Wick, and even Nobody, which came out about the same time, and it's far superior. And I think it fails to live up to any of these or bring anything new to the conversation, which I think Guy Ritchie has been able to do. And I think Wrath of Man is basic.
And time. All right, Noah, over to you. Time starts when you begin speaking.
The definition for overrated, according to Google, when I Googled it, is rated or valued too highly. I want to focus on the keyword they're valued. It's because of this definition that I chose the spoiled answer, Sherlock Holmes from 2009. Guy Ritchie almost completely changes the character from the detective that we know and love to this scrapping action hero. It's a popcorn-friendly movie instead of this cerebral think piece detective movie that that Sherlock Holmes is known for being. It has a less than stellar script, and that makes this more of a standard issue superhero movie, if anything. All of the changes Ritchie made to something new, but they don't work for the film overall. And I'll concede the rest.
All right. It is Wrath of Man versus Sherlock Holmes. That said, Joe, back over to you. You have 2 minutes to expand when ready, sir.
Looking at overrated, you have to look at, I think, a general consensus sort of overall. I think Wrath of Man and Sherlock Holmes are separated by maybe a 0.5 out of 10 on IMDb, I believe. Wrath of Man is at 7.1 and Sherlock Holmes is at 7.6. So again, very close. I think the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, I think there's a 2% difference in Sherlock Holmes's favor. And on the audience side, there's a 13% difference in Wrath of Man's favor. Wrath of Man sits at 90% with audiences, which is surprising. When you actually look at the movie, the sort of someone going out for revenge against the loss of a loved one, stuff like that. It's very derivative these days. And I think to put that in such a high category when it offers nothing new to the conversation, nothing stand out in terms of acting performances or direction, I think it's very difficult to put that when you have a movie like Sherlock Holmes, which I think has a fantastic performance in it, several fantastic performances in it. In terms of direction, you have these action sequences that are very unique in terms of this movie. They're not something that you may have seen in another film, and I think that's a credit to Guy Ritchie. I think you have a score from Hans Zimmer, which is absolutely phenomenal, which despite the fact that it's been a while since I've seen Sherlock Holmes, but it's still something that I can still hum, I can still sing. Whereas there's nothing memorable in Wrath of Man. You're talking about a revenge film. You go to a film like Nobody, you have that amazing sort of like end battle sequence with Christopher Lloyd coming back and kicking serious ass, or John Wick, where there's so many memorable kills, like the stuff with the pencil and that. I think if you're making a revenge film, you need to have something that stands out about it. And I think Wrath of Man doesn't do that. And I think to sit at the ratings that it does with critics and with audiences, I think it's a very difficult thing. I think it's very by the numbers. I think it's very derivative, and it doesn't offer anything new to the conversation. Whereas Sherlock Holmes, on the other hand, I think is very unique and does stand out and does have moments that stand out. And I think that's what puts it at that high rating, because it is unique.
And time. All right, Noah, back over to you, sir.
Joe is right in terms of IMDb scores and Rotten Tomato scores. Wrath of Man earned $104 million at the box office, while Sherlock Holmes earned $524 million. And I want to bring you back to the word overvalued. It is clear that in every way Sherlock Holmes outperforms and outrates Wrath of Man, but it doesn't deserve to. Wrath of Man sees Ritchie shift his exaggerative tendencies down a few gears and allows this movie to perform on its own rather than on its rather engaging story and action set pieces, and the action set pieces are engaging. It's a perfect Statham role with even a few touching moments sent his way with his son. An argument could be made that Ritchie changes to be more accepted by the masses and not be niche, but Ritchie makes these changes to fit the film better. The film is darker, more violent, and has less humor than his usual films, but it's because of the message and the tone of the movie that it's naturally darker. It's dealing with the death of a son and the dark path of revenge. The heist scene in Wrath of Man is high-paced, exciting, and gives a new twist to heist scenes. You're saying it does nothing new. This is some of the best action that we have seen in a Guy Ritchie film because he's an action director. But he tries to shove action into a detective story, and it doesn't work. You could say that it's okay to try things differently in terms of changing Sherlock Holmes, but in doing so changes what made him interesting. The changes don't work in the favor of the film. Sherlock Holmes, master of intuition and logic, turns into some kind of mystical cult ghost death thing, which is the opposite of awesome. I'm not saying this is the worst movie ever, and I'm not saying Wrath of Man is the best Ritchie. But Sherlock Holmes is overrated, and Wrath of Man deserves to be where it is. It's near the top when it comes to box office returns, Sherlock Holmes, and consistently near top of ratings and lists, and above Wrath of Man in website rankings. Wrath of Man is the better movie, and Sherlock Holmes has too many issues to be rated and valued that high. Yes, it doesn't add anything new, Wrath of Man, but it deserves to stay where it's at. It's valued quickly.
And time. All right. We're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. Timer starts back up when the first competitor speaks.
First of all, I can't believe you actually gave us the Webster's Dictionary defines as the opening to your argument, but hey, that's where we're at. I think what you say about Sherlock Holmes saying that things don't work, I actually think the action sequences work really well. I think that whole stuff of Sherlock breaking down what he's doing, it is an understanding of that character. It's showing how he considers things, how he views the world, how he sees things, he's able to do it, and then you get that sped up action sequence, which in other films, just a sped up action sequence wouldn't necessarily work because you can't really follow the action. Because it's been broken down for you before, I think it adds that extra layer to it. Whereas I've seen Wrath of Man this year. I haven't seen Sherlock Holmes this year. I could not tell you a single kill, a single line of dialogue, a single part of the score, a single sequence from that movie that is memorable in any way, shape, or form. So to have it sitting so close to Sherlock Holmes when there's so much after so many years that I can still list, I can still hum the theme tune, dun 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 dun. It sticks. These things are all memorable and they stick for a reason. There's a reason we got a second one. There's a reason we're getting a third.
There should be, you should go back and revisit Sherlock Holmes because it is problematic. And you're saying all of your personal opinions and your feelings are like, oh, I can't remember anything from Wrath of Man. How is anyone supposed to believe you for that? I mean, I'm not saying Wrath of Man is the best Guy Ritchie film. It has a great set piece when it comes to that heist scene. It's invigorating and it keeps you captivated, and it doesn't feel as long as it is. That action scene in the boatyard with Sherlock Holmes and that big guy, it just goes on forever, and it feels like it lasts forever, and it doesn't need to. Sherlock Holmes isn't it's supposed to be an action character. He's a detective, and you don't see too much of him being a detective rather than just having observation.
But we've had Sherlock Holmes movies in the past. How many of them can you name? It's difficult because the thing is, they're not memorable. Those Sherlock Holmes movies from before Guy Ritchie took over, they've been difficult. The fact is, Sherlock Holmes has been praised by critics and audiences, not just fans of Sherlock Holmes, but fans of the books, saying that they understand things. That's the thing. Guy Ritchie takes that care. There's some care in that craft. When you add things in like Mrs. Hudson's, him suspecting Mrs. Hudson of poisoning his tea, that's a reference to the books about her trying to build up his immunity. And that's a good thing. That's something that's subtle enough that it goes unnoticed by an audience who doesn't know it, but it doesn't affect their enjoyment of it. But fans of it can turn around and go, I understand that reference. That's great. It's the same sort of thing that we got with No Time to Die, where there was references in there that people understood who understood the source material, but it doesn't affect the viewing of people that doesn't. I think there's a lot of care that goes into that. And I think that's why it gets appreciated, not just by film fans, but also by fans of the books as well.
But it just turns into another superhero movie. It turns into this character who is now seemingly invincible from everything thrown his way, as well as Watson. I mean, they stand next to an explosion and nothing really happens to them. They're battling atop this bridge that's being built, and you don't really feel any stakes. You don't feel worried for
compared to a character who takes basically down an entire army of people just to try and get revenge. That's not superhero.
He gets hurt. He gets shot. He gets taken down multiple times in the movie. You see it. You see him get shot and lying there. He ends up in the hospital multiple times because of that.
Sherlock and Watson get hurt all the time. There's that stuff with the explosion. Watson is very badly injured by that explosion. I think the difference with Wrath of Man is that you're doing something that is quite common at the moment with these revenge films. So you're not adding anything new to the conversation. Wrath of Man is too gritty to be considered like fun and campy, but too familiar to feel like it's anything new. I think that's a huge problem with it.
It's a totally different Guy Ritchie movie, because a lot of his Guy Ritchie movies have these quick, quippy, fast dialogue, but you don't get that in this film. It's something darker and it's more grittier and violent. It's because it's dealing with this dark tone, and Ritchie makes these changes, and it fits the movie. And it fits the movie. I'm not saying this is the best movie.
Lacks any sort of character development. It tries to pass Statham was cold and time. It doesn't work.
All right, Joe, you're going to get to continue that point, sir. You're up first for the closing. The timer will start back up for you once you're ready.
Sherlock Holmes has solid ratings, and with critics and audiences, it's appropriately rated rather than being overrated in terms of a critic score, audience score, and in fact, in terms of the critic score, I actually think, in terms of audience score, I think underrated. It has a compelling mystery that isn't ruined or diminished by the reveal in the end, so it allows it to be revisited. It has memorable performances that offer something new. Look at RDJ. No one thought he'd be able to pull off Sherlock Holmes, but Wrath of Man is a by-the-numbers revenge film that offers nothing new to the conversation, has no point other than swimming in the slipstream of better movies in the genre like John Wick, like Nobody, and it certainly doesn't deserve to sit near the top of the rankings of Guy Ritchie films like near Sherlock Holmes. There's no sort of character development where you do get that character development with Holmes understanding Watson and his relationship and getting to grips with that. There is that character development in there, whereas Wrath of Man, it tries to pass off Statham as this cold, calculating father. You can't even emotionally connect with him because he's so cold and so wooden throughout that movie, whereas RDJ is a standout.
And time. All right. Noah, over to you then when ready.
Sherlock Holmes might have been entertaining for its time, but it's turned into another superhero actiony film where Sherlock Holmes is supposed to be this detective character. Wrath of Man, it does something different. Guy Ritchie is doing something different. It's darker, it's grittier. Yes, Statham is a little bit darker, more cold in this movie because he's supposed to, because he saw his son get killed in front of him, and now he's on this revenge quest. You see that relationship that he has with his son, and it's very touching. A couple of the moments, especially when he's running towards his son as he's being shot. You feel it. The bank heist gives a new twist to bank heist scenes, and you didn't even argue against that point. Sherlock Holmes, you don't really feel any stakes. A lot of the CGI doesn't work anymore. A lot of the action doesn't really work anymore. He tries to shove action into this detective movie, and it doesn't work. But you see that action done incredibly well in Wrath of Man. I'm not saying it deserves to be top tier. It deserves to be right where it's at. It's in the middle of the pack. Sherlock Holmes is consistently above it in terms of rating, reviews, and it made way more money than it did.
And time. All right, competitors, we'll go ahead and sit you guys in the back. We'll bring the judges in for the deliberations. All right, so in terms of checking some things out, all the numbers that were ran out by the competitors were 100% correct. Using Rotten Tomatoes as a general consensus, 67% approval rating with a score of 6.3 for Wrath of Man, 90% audience approval rating. Sherlock Holmes has 69% critic approval rating with a score of 6.2, and it is a 77% audience rating there. So all things considered amongst critics, pretty even audiences. A varying spectrum there, at least in terms of reviews submitted. More go for Wrath of Man than Sherlock Holmes necessarily. In terms of another metric I like to use when it's something very specific like this is ranked lists, going to different verified sites and ranking lists. I'm not going to bother reading them because, quite frankly, these two films both placed almost on every list between the 4 and 6 slot with some alternating positions depending on where you went. So in that sense, they're considered about the same. And then the last note is with the box office, Sherlock Holmes did far outgross Wrath of Man. However, Wrath of Man is considered to be one of the films that is still a part of that period of time that was affected by the pandemic. Overall, theater attendance was down during that period, and the film itself had to move release dates 3 or 4 times based on spikes in COVID cases and when they thought they could best perform. It also wasn't released worldwide in theaters completely, so it also had less markets than Sherlock Holmes did because of that. There were some markets where they just distributed it at home because they couldn't find a good time to put it in theaters. So there are some caveats to it grossed more because of when Wrath of Man came out. With that said, though, Nick, I'll go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
These types of questions are always difficult, and both these guys kind of brought it, and it was pretty even going back and forth. By a narrow margin, I decided to go with Joe. I think that he was able to really kind of counter a lot of Noah's points about Sherlock Holmes, and the point that sticks to me. There's a reason that we got the sequel and that we're getting a third film. So yeah, I had to go with Joe on this one.
Okay, Chris, down to you.
Yeah, this was a great back and forth. Great, in my opinion, switch back and forth. Slight margin just because of closing. And Noah said something that agreed with me. I went with Noah. I think Noah brought a lot of Wrath of Man. I think Joe just could have counterbalanced why Wrath of Man is not as good. And Noah managed to manage everything that did work with Sherlock Holmes. The characterization, the action sequence, unbelievability. So Noah got my vote. Why?
Okay. Austin, over to you then. Who gets your vote?
This one again came down for me to the back and forth round, and then going back and forth. And to me, Joe had some incredible counters in the back and forth round. A lot about revisiting the movie that we're getting, those sequels, and the care it had for the material of Sherlock Holmes, and the fact that they probably still made the best Sherlock Holmes movie or the most memorable Sherlock Holmes movie up to this point. Him breaking down the action sequences and why they're necessary for the movie. So yeah, he just had a lot better back and forth during that round and a better overall argument for me. So Joe.
All right. Well, judges, thank you guys so much. We're going to go ahead and sit you in the back as we'll go ahead and get into question number 4 here. And I don't have a natural transition for this one because this director is not a natural director. Pick his most mainstream film. It's still not really mainstream. So the question is, what is the best film directed by Nicholas Winding Refn? I was going to make... When was the last time he even directed a movie? It's been a couple years, hasn't it? Was Neon Demon the last one he did? Holy shit, that's been a minute. All right. Well, anyways, it's not Neon Demon, surprise. But of the rest, which one is the best? With that said, Noah, you're up first, so the timer will start when you begin speaking.
If you haven't seen any of his films, Nicholas Winding Refn is the definition of a niche director. His works are known for their very distinct sense of style, and a lot of critiques about his movies are that they are over stylistic and they don't provide much. But there is one movie where style is vital to the movie and uses the film medium to its advantage. Drive is able to be this 100-minute movie because he uses his style to tell you things about the character and about the movie that lesser movies would have had to explicitly say. It explores the dichotomy of both LA and the driver, being how Refn refers to them as werewolves. They're able to completely transform into something completely different when they need to. It explores how the aesthetics are used in the film, and it subverts it with Albert Brooks's character. Everything works about this movie: the music, the actors, the cinematography, every ounce of dialogue, and the vibes, making this his best movie.
And time. All right, Joe, over to you, sir, when ready.
When talking about a director's best, I think it's important to look through their filmographies and find something that is not only very entertaining, but pinpoints a specific style. And Nicholas Winding Refn is a very stylistic director, but you want to look at something that has something unique about it as well, something that really shows what this director is capable of. And that's why I picked something that's more than does something beyond just telling a story, which is why I picked Bronson. Bronson is a 2008 biopic about Britain's most notorious prisoner, Michael Peterson, aka Charlie Bronson. What sets the film apart is, one, the incredible career-making performance from Tom Hardy. Two, the story surrounding Bronson being truly fascinating and engaging. And three, the way in which the story is framed. I think the framing around this movie, the framing device, the choices that Nicholas Winding Refn makes as a director, I think make this film truly stand apart and really engage not just him as a director, but him as an auteur.
And time. All right, it is Drive versus Bronson. Noah, back over to you, sir, when ready.
Bronson is supposed to be this biopic of London's most violent prisoner. And in a biopic, you should be able to relate to the person in the film. And it should be personable. But every time every time in this movie that you get close to this character because of Tom Hardy's performance, it's ruined by these far out, really crazy, wacky scenes that pull audience out of the movie. It's not Tom Hardy's fault. It's Refn's fault for making the choices that just don't work for the person and for the movie. I mean, if you want an example, the ending of this movie is a bare naked fight where Tom Hardy is in black paint all over his body, fighting off prison guards, and yes, you see his penis. There isn't much driving this movie, and there isn't much that's interesting about this character. He is just a violent criminal. He's a violent person. There isn't much else. He fights a lot of people. That's it. Drive features a perfect blend of drama and suspense, with amazing visuals and a memorable synth pop soundtrack. Some might say this movie is style over substance, but this visual style that is just so prevalent is substance. In the medium of film, style is important. Drive tells you all you need to know about characters through maybe one or two lines of dialogue and just what you see on the screen. It also subverts what you see. There's a line where Gosling asks this kid how he knows his TV character is a bad guy, and the kid goes, well, he's a shark, look at him. And then he flips that with Albert Brooks's character. Perlman's character looks like this mean and dangerous villain, but actually it's Albert Brooks as the terrifying killer. Refn's command of his medium, from sound to cinematography to its set pieces, are orchestrated seamlessly, and he elicits genuine emotion from the tragic romance between Ryan Gosling and Carey Mulligan. And yes, there is chemistry between them, between the cute little smiles that they give each other and that incredible elevator kiss right before he bashes this guy head in.
And time. All right, Joe, back over to you, sir. 2 minutes on the clock for yourself when ready.
There are segments in Bronson that feature the titular Bronson on a stage, sometimes in clown makeup, addressing an audience and basically narrating the story. I think the reason this works so well and why it wouldn't work so well in the hands of a lesser director is that it really does capture the madness behind Bronson. It's a way of diving into the psyche of this person without forced exposition within the narrative that would necessarily be out of character. I think as a director, it shows Refn's understanding of Charlie Bronson, his understanding of this person. I think the movie toes a perfect line with the violence that it shows. It never glamorizes it, but it never bemoans it at the same time. What it does, instead of just explaining, oh, sometimes people are bad even if they don't look it, like Drive does, I think what Refn does with Bronson is it puts the onus on the audience, which is something that a very talented filmmakers are able to do, is to put that onus on the audience, to make them feel uncomfortable, to make them sit in this position, whereas this violence is not glamorized, but it's also not being attacked. It lets you make up your own mind. It's the director putting that trust in an audience. And I think only the true artists really do that, and they really do that. And Refn does that really well here. Refn manages to capture the true chaos of Bronson without sacrificing the believability. Plus, you get an appearance from a young Trent Crimm from Ted Lasso, which is obviously fantastic, and everyone's going to love that. But I think if you look at the best movies ever, they all have something that makes them stand apart, whether that be a performance or a framing device. Like Pulp Fiction has its non-linear storyline. Godfather 2 has the duality of Michael and Vito. I'm not saying Bronson is Godfather 2, but what I'm saying is that they were the best of Tarantino and Coppola, and I think this is the best of Refn because it shows what he's doing. It takes what he's learned from the movies he's made before, putting that trust out on the audience, using those different skills of framing it in a different way, telling a story in a different way, not just telling a story from A to B. I think it's telling a story in a different way, understanding the character you're trying to tell, understanding the points you're trying to make, and using different framing devices, different skills to do that. Plus, you get the phenomenal performance from Hardy.
All right, that is time. We're going to go into the open discussion. Time starts when the first competitor speaks.
Tom Hardy isn't enough to keep us interested in this movie. Yes, he gives us great performance, but the character itself, Charles Bronson itself, is not interesting, and you're not interested in finding out more about this character. He is violent. He is constantly trying to fight people, but this movie is incredibly boring because a lot of it are those slow motion fight scenes when he's naked or something else. And then there's this slog in the middle. This movie's 90 minutes. But there's a slog in the middle of him at this mental hospital, and it's completely boring. You really don't care about this character. You're not interested. There's not much more to find out about him, but there is in Drive. Everything is firing in Drive. Everything works in Drive together. The only thing working in Bronson is the performance by Tom Hardy. There's nothing else going on.
You say, yes, everything works in the movie, but part of your argument was insisting, like, yes, Mulligan and Gosling do have chemistry. You had to really insist that because it's really not that noticeable. It's really hard sort of to get that believability. Yeah, I see where you're trying to come from with the story behind Charlie Bronson, but I think it's not just necessarily about that person. It's about understanding that there are people like that. And I think to understand, to feel sympathy.
But what's the point from that? What's the point from that? We do nothing from it. There's nothing beneficial for us. There's nothing
it's
going
about
on.
Putting the audience in a position where they're watching that violence. It's about, it's never, like I said, you're never attacking the violence, but you're also never glamorizing it. You're putting your audience in a position of seeing how they feel about that. To walk on an audience.
But why? It does nothing.
You have to leave the audience with a question. It's like, do I agree with this? Because you have those criticisms about him being put in the mental hospital where there isn't, the protection for the other people. You're asking those questions of the justice system and all that. It's still, the film's still relevant even today. Bronson just a month ago had another parole appeal rejected. There are people who are interested in this person because he's still relevant today. I think
But he's not. Just because he had a parole hearing doesn't mean that people are interested in this story. That's just something that's happened in his life.
With Drive, you have a movie that offers nothing new. I think true greatness in a film is something that stands apart. What stands apart in Drive, apart from Albert Brooks's lack of eyebrows?
The fact that it changed alternative music. The fact that this movie changed alternative music.
It also changed music, so that's great.
This huge genre of vaporwave and made it come to the surface.
What changed?
The fact that it's showing this incredible romance and showing this chemistry between the two, and showing how he can just switch that on a dime and he becomes this intensely violent person, not for himself, but protect everyone else, to help everyone else.
So basically, it hinges on Gosling's performance, whereas with Brosnan,
It hinges on everything. On everything. His
Bronson, you have
performance, Carey Mulligan's performance, Oscar Isaac, who's amazing.
Framing of the story, right? Drive. What makes it stands apart from, say, Only God Forgives or the aforementioned in the previous argument, A Place Beyond the Pines? Stuff like The Driver, Bullet, Shane. These are all movies that have shown a character similar to the driver in Drive, but have done it in a better way. Whereas
Driver
like that hasn't been done before, and it's not been done in a way as artistically or stylistically as Refn does it. And everything he does in Bronson still manages to work. Whereas the things he does in the choices he makes in Drive as a director, things like the editing, the slow pacing, the uneven pace, these don't
Drive uses everything that he's learned in his previous films, and he uses it perfectly. He practices brevity. He uses what you're seeing and his style to inform you of what's going on and inform you about these characters. That's what's so exceptional about this movie. It's because you're seeing everything and you perfectly understand what you're seeing. You understand these characters and their motivations, and you really are moved by them. In Bronson, you're not moved by that at all.
The style comes purely from cinematography.
And time. All right. With that said, we're going to jump into the 1 minute closing for each competitor. Noah, you are up first, so the timer will start 1 second after you begin speaking.
Bronson is the epitome of style over substance. You're just seeing this character fight people all the time, and you don't feel bad for him because he is being violent. He's doing it of his own accord. He's not interesting. He doesn't have any other characteristics or anything interesting about him. We don't care about this character. We're forced into this hour and a half movie, and Tom Hardy is the only thing that's making us maybe not turn it off at that exact moment, but he's not enough to save that movie. It's incredibly boring. Drive is heart-pounding and on every turn. It shows how Ryan Gosling can be this kind and caring person, but you mess with the people he cares about, he's going to murder you, and he can flip the switch and be this brutal character. Oscar Isaac is amazing the 10 minutes he's in this movie, and Albert Brooks subverts everyone's expectations and becomes this villain that you didn't see coming, and he's very threatening very quickly. This movie is style, but it uses that style for a reason.
And time. All right, Joe, back over to you, sir. You have 1 minute left as well. One ready.
The areas in which Drive truly falls down are the areas in which responsibility falls squarely on the director's shoulders. Poorly paced, lack of chemistry between leads, and poorly chosen camera effects all take away from a movie which had the potential to be truly great. What sets Bronson apart from the rest of Refn's work is this truly amazing performance from Hardy. Plus, you have the choices Refn makes in telling the story. It's not just the content of the story that are interesting; it's the way in which the story is told. Refn takes a big swing in this aspect, and it does pay off. In the hands of a lesser director, it wouldn't necessarily have done so. You could have got clunky exposition, but by using this framing device of him addressing this fake audience, it shows this sort of lust for fame that he had. You have the scenes of him outside of prison, which show that he doesn't fit in. The way he places the camera, all these things show that he's just not fitting in until he's in prison, till he's in that violent world. I think that's the difference here. I think the cinematography is the only real thing that stands out. That is style over substance. The substance may be just bubbling under the surface in Bronson, but it is there. You have that style, you have that substance. It's about the character, and he does it perfectly.
And time. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and put you both in the back, and we will bring our judges forward here. In terms of fact checks, there's not really a lot to check as our judges finish up there, because I always like to commend the competitors when they do this. That is how you guys have an argument, focusing on the films, not the outside things that surround the movies, the films themselves. That's how you argue passion behind a film. So there isn't much to fact check, because I can't sit here and watch two 2+ hour movies and fact check all the different little things they dissected about the film. What I can say is I have only seen Drive once, but when I did watch it, I did not notice that Albert Brooks had no eyebrows. I had to Google that picture just to be certain, and now I will never not see it. I'm almost saddened that I was here to hear that. That said, though, our judges are ready to go. So, Chris, I'll go to you first this time. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
This was a tough one. A lot of back and forth. Both great choices. I haven't seen one of them by Aaron. But I went with Joe Farrelly by the slight margin. I think he just managed to hit at Drive to many points with the lack of chemistry, with that, that the Drive had just been done before. And he managed to brought up differently about Tom Hardy in the movie with them being outside the prison stuff. So it was slightest margin here, Joe.
Okay. Austin, down to you.
Great debate. Two phenomenal movies from two phenomenal competitors. Very, very close. I think for me, Joe focused on more on why Nicholas Refn, his direction of Bronson really stands out with the framing devices, with the way he challenges the audience with the moralities of everything. It's not just an A to B story. The way he just constructs everything as a director, he really focused on that for me as to why it's a really standout Refn movie. So, Joe, for me, got it.
All right. Well, judges, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back, though, because we're not finished quite yet. We go ahead and bring the competitors in. We are going to get into the speed round. So here's the way that it works. The speed round is a best 2 of 3. It's a number 1 contenders match. They're going to have to work a little harder for this tonight. So that means they are going to have to make it to 4 points now, technically, instead of 3. They have to win 2 of them. The first 2 questions the competitors have, they have had their opportunity to prep those alongside their regular questions. So there's no surprise there. The third question will be a question they're not aware of, but there won't be any trickery around it like the blind round. They'll get to answer the answer they think suits the actual question and debate from there. In terms of how this works, it'll be 60 seconds. It'll be a 60-second opening, a 90-second rebuttal, and a 30-second closing. The open discussion period is gone. And as a reminder to our judges, and I'll, of course, remind you guys when we get there again, for the speed round, in order to keep it at the pace of a normal round, you will just be saying who your vote goes to. There will not be any deliberation on the point further. When I go to you, just simply say the name. All right? Guys ready to go for this? Okay. So let's jump into it. I kicked I kicked Guy Ritchie while he was up earlier. So let's raise somebody who desperately needs it now, because I don't think the Flash's box office is going to get any better from here. Let's praise DC. The question is, what is the best film based on DC Comics? With that said, we'll go ahead and bring up the timer. Joe, continuing the trend, you're going to go first on this question. So your first 60 starts when you begin speaking.
For me, the best movie based on the DC comic is Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins does something that no other DC movie is able to do before. Firstly, you have 6 Batman movies coming before Batman Begins, yet it still manages to stay fresh and stay relevant. I think it does a really interesting thing with the Batman character, something that's been a very big criticism of the Batman character is, oh, if all he wants to do, why doesn't he just do, why doesn't he just give money to people? And I think that there's a very fantastic conversation between Bruce Wayne and Ra's al Ghul before he realizes he's Ra's al Ghul, which explains why he wants to do what he does, why it has to be the sort of justice that Batman's dishing out. I think it's a really fantastic way to look at the character. I think for a movie that does all these things, introducing these characters, reintroducing audiences to these characters, it does a fantastic way of building these characters up. It introduces a villain that a lot of movie audiences aren't as familiar with. I think it does that great balance between the two villains, between Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul. I think you get great performances from all the actors in there. I think it builds the world really well. You get a fantastic performance from Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon. I think the action is really well done. I think the new style of Batmobile is really well done. I think based on DC Comics, it does a really good job of building up the comic book, but also telling its own story.
And time. All right, Noah, over to you.
For the best film based on DC Comics, I went with Road to Perdition. This is Sam Mendes coming off of the back of a win with American Beauty, his Oscar. Max Collins, the author of Road to Perdition, the comic, says that himself that 2/3 of this movie is directly from the comics. So if we're talking about based on comics, Road to Perdition is the best DC-based comics. It's got a star-studded cast, and yet they don't muddle the movie with trying to outdo each other. They all just do what's best for the movie. And at the heart, before that, this movie is great on all technical aspects. All the performances are well done. There's not a lot of CGI used. They use actual Model 2 cars and everything like that. But at the heart of it is a story about this father and his son, and about his son discovering, oh, my dad's this cool secret hero. Oh, wait a minute. No, he's not. He's this horrible person who kills people. Wait a minute. No, he's not. He's my dad. And it's this heartwarming story that ends tragically, and it keeps you captivated.
All right, Joe, back over to you. 90 seconds.
think one of the issues with Road to Perdition is that you get a performance from Tom Hanks, which is a good performance, but I don't think he's the right actor for that role. I think Tom Hanks has always been sort of seen as, that friendly father, that friendly uncle type, where he does have those parts. I think the stuff of him being a cold-blooded killer doesn't quite work. And I also think Jude Law's performance is a little bit side to the movie. He also almost feels like he's kind of in a different movie. We're talking about movies based on DC Comics. And I think one of the interesting things about a comic book is that it can transport you to a different world, even if it's sort of within your own world. I think that's really interesting in the depiction of Gotham in there. I think out of Christopher Nolan's 3 Batman movies, I think this one is the best representation of Gotham, because you have that stuff in the Narrows around Arkham Asylum, which separates it from the rest of those, where Gotham seems a little bit more cleaner in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. I think Christian Bale is a revelation. I think you get that really good balance of that duality between Bruce Wayne and Batman, about him, trying to act rich and spoiled to try and distance himself from being pulled out as Batman. I think you get that really well. I think the way it does the characters, like the stuff around costume, like Batman's costume, the Scarecrow's mask, stuff like that, the reveal of Ra's al Ghul, I think that's all done really, really well. And like I said, it's about bringing you into this world when it's based on a comic. With Road to Perdition, you get a world that's set, just set back in the day, sort of the Al Capone days. Whereas with Batman Begins, you have that world of Gotham that you're bringing into. So you're bringing into a sort of a world you're kind of familiar with, but also this is very different. It's very gritty, very dark, and you have those things from the comics, like the Narrows and all that sort of stuff, that brings you into it. I think that's why it's based on DC Comics. The story's fantastic. I think the origin story part of it's fantastic, and I think the stuff, especially even just focused on Bruce Wayne, little things like him stealing from Wayne Enterprises, so he's never really a criminal, are fantastic.
And time. All right, Noah, back over to you.
Batman Begins is not the best comic book movie ever made, because it is not the best comic book movie. Instead, director Christopher Nolan has created a movie that just happens to involve a guy dressing up like a bat. Previous Batman films were already created as a comic book come to life. Tim Burton does that in his first 2 comic book movies. Batman Begins isn't a terrible film. It simply isn't that good, and it isn't the best one based off of the comics. It's completely long, vaguely goofy in places, and straining for gravity and dignity. He takes an admirable stab at developing a character-driven drama, only to be given in the generic action movie conventions, with a blinding, deafening, explosion-laden finale that could have capped off any number of interchangeable action movies, instead of being this true comic book movie. But the writer of Road to Perdition himself said that this movie is 2/3 directly from the comic book. You're saying that Tom Hanks isn't casted properly. I think he is, because we haven't seen him in this role before. We haven't seen him, and it's interesting to see him as his cold-blooded killer, but also who regrets doing it, and he's not happy with the life that he's chosen, and he wants better for his son. And you see that throughout the entire movie. You see this relationship grow on this road trip, basically, between these 2 characters, and it's the realization that the son is realizing, my dad's not perfect, my dad's not evil, but he's my dad and he's my father, and that's what I have. And it's completely based off the comics, and that's what you want.
And time. All right, 30 seconds left to close it out. Joe, you're up first.
Yes, Road to Perdition is based on 2/3 of the comic. That doesn't give it the right to be the best movie based off the DC comic. It still has to present a good movie. And I think you have that performance from Tom Hanks, which doesn't quite fit with the character he's playing. You've got that performance from Jude Law, which doesn't quite fit with the movie. You waste actors like Paul Newman and Kieran Hines because they're not in it for enough. Whereas when you've got Batman Begins, you are bringing that world to life, but also you're giving characters new things. You've got plenty of characters in that movie, whether it be Batman, Alfred, all these sort of characters. They're all given something to do. Jim Gordon, Rachel Dawes, they're all given something to do. And I think that's a really reflection of a good movie. You're telling a good origin story, giving all your characters something to do, and you get a complete resolution.
And time. And then Noah, final 30 for you.
It's funny that you bring up Rachel Dawes, because you have a boring and actually horrible Rachel Dawes in this film. It may be a decent Batman film. It's not the best in the trilogy. Dark Knight is the best in the trilogy, and it's not even the best Batman movie based off of the comic book. That would be the first 2 Batmans made by Tim Burton. But this Road to Perdition is the best movie when it comes to all technical aspects. The way they shot it, the lighting, the rain, everything, the blocking, but the relationship between the father and the son. Every one of these actors performs very well. You're seeing Paul Newman. Paul Newman holds that weight, but he's not needed for the rest of the movie. He's just needed for that one scene.
And time.
Couple scenes.
Strike it from the record.
All right.
I misspoke.
I brought Nazario's quote into it.
I apologize, guys. Yeah, if for some reason with this timer in particular, there always seems to be some slight issues. I hate it, but eventually I'll remember to try and fix it. With that said, I'll bring the judges in here, guys. Remember, I am just getting your answers. When I say your name, give me who you're voting for. With that said, Austin.
Joe.
Jeff.
And Nick. Okay. All right. So the first vote goes to Joe. Judges, thank you, guys. We'll go ahead and put you in the backs. And
we can edit this out, but can I just clarify? When you submitted this question, I was watching the trilogy in IMAX through the night, and I just finished Begins. I was like, I noticed so much stuff like that, stuff around Bruce Wayne, probably justifying why he doesn't just give money to the poor. And I was like, that's such a good character beat that I hadn't noticed before. Oh, I got to use this.
All right. So we're going to jump into a second question here. A question that I wrote off of an assumption I made about their most recent film, Elemental, which I disagree with because I actually quite enjoyed that movie. The question is, of all the Pixar films, which one has the weakest lead character? A studio known for their characters, who is the weakest lead? That said, Noah, you're going to get 60 seconds on the clock to open. Timer starts when you're ready.
My choice is Ian Lightfoot from the film Onward because he's selfish the entire movie. He doesn't realize that his brother also lost a dad too, and that his brother has been trying to be this good older brother and father figure to him. He isn't an interesting character. He's just kind of this annoying little brother, and he's a dick to his older brother for screwing up. He calls his brother a screw up. His brother is the interesting character. It's not Ian. It's his brother. He takes over as his father figure without once showing how much he hurts and how much he misses his dad and is there for him. And that speech that he gives where he's at the end where he's saying, I was too scared to go in and so I couldn't say goodbye to dad is more impactful to his brother's character. There's nothing impactful or interesting about Ian. Sure, he maybe makes one sacrifice at the end of it saying, hey, big brother, you go say hi to dad and I'll just stay here instead. But that doesn't make him the best character. He's the weakest character in all of Pixar because he is one note for all the entire film. He's annoying, he's rude, and he's a jerk to his older brother who shows him nothing but love.
And time. All right, Joe, over to you.
For me, the weakest lead in the Pixar movie is Arlo from The Good Dinosaur. I think the issue with The Good Dinosaur is if you just look at the movie itself and the way the story is told, it's basically a series of vignettes. It's Arlo, it's going out, it's meeting different characters and having different adventures throughout that. Yes, you have the stuff with Spot that sort of throughout it, but it's about them two together and then meeting different people. I think that's a sign of a weak lead character when their whole persona, their whole adventure is through the people they meet and the adventure they have with other people while not necessarily focusing on them. I think with Ian Lightfoot, I think you get a fantastic character. Yes, he is selfish at the beginning and yes, he has that stuff, but that's part of his journey. I think when you're a young kid, I think you do tend to focus on yourself a little bit more. It's about him learning those lessons and building up. As the journey goes on, you see him getting closer and closer to his brother. You see him doing that, and that's why you get to that ultimate sacrifice in the end. It's a sacrifice that pays off because of the journey this character's been through. Whereas with Arlo, it's just a series about him trying to get home and the adventures he has with the people on the way, whether it be the dinosaur, whether it be the cattle rustlers, whether it be the storm chasers and all these sort of other characters. It's all about the people who has in them because that's a sign of a bad lead character because you have to focus on the other characters around them.
And time. All right, Noah, over to you.
All these characters are used as tools throughout the entire film to help develop Arlo and his character. You see that through the entire film. It sets out very early that Arlo has this problem of being scared of everything, of being frightened. You see that his dad tries to get rid of it, that for him and realizes he made a mistake shortly before he dies. And that's when Arlo's terrified. You see him start to overcome his fear throughout this entire movie and start to fight back and really hold his ground. But at the end, when he's facing his true fear, the fear that he thinks that he's responsible for his dad's death, that is the real crux of the movie. And that's the most emotional part of the movie, is because he's facing that fear. And that's the most terrifying fear that he has. And I think that's a very strong character who goes on this journey of self-realization and learning this very adult lesson that he has to confront fear. And it's not about not being scared of anything. It's about having the courage to stand up when you are scared. And he learns that throughout the entire movie. And you see him settle with the fact that maybe it was his fault, but he has to figure that out, and he has to he confronts that fear. That's a very emotional and very impactful story. But Onward, it's not. Ian is very, like I said, one note throughout the entire movie. He's a jerk. He's an asshole to his older brother who is just trying to be this father to him, and he doesn't have any development until the last 5 minutes of the film, and that's it.
All right, Joe, back over to you.
Onward has some very interesting moments, which I think do frame Ian outside of that selfish and just one note. Because you have that thing where he's trying to invite people to his birthday party, and he's already very nervous, and you've seen earlier in the movie that he does have some embarrassment from his from Barley, but then when Barley comes in, it sort of embarrasses him even more, and he backs out of it. It's about him gaining that confidence. You see that lack of it. It's not just the fact that he's selfish. You can see that he's an awkward, nervous teenager, like we all have been. The difference with Arlo is you get that loss of fear throughout the movie, but there's never really shown any moment where he is the one fighting against it. He's forced into those situations. Where with Ian and Barley, they're working together. You have that stuff that comes together. They're more joint leads than actual leads, but Ian still has these moments where his character is developed, where it's that growth of seeing that stuff, of trusting his brother, and then trying not to trust his brother because he wants to try and go out on his own. Then he realizes he should have listened to his brother. All that sort of stuff. It's different little things that come out from when you are a kid. The problem with Arlo is you don't have any of those moments. You don't have any of those moments that show, why he's developing, why he's growing. You have these interactions with the other characters, which focus on these other characters because he hasn't got that draw, that thing that really pulls you in. With Ian, you do get that strong vocal performance from Tom Holland. He bounces off Chris Pratt very well, and they work very well together. So not only do you have that voice that already draws you in as an audience member, you have these moments that you share with your family. So many movies focus on mother-daughter, mother-son, father-son sort of relationships. There are very few that sort of focus on brothers, and I think that's a very unique standpoint, and I think that's why the character is so interesting and unique.
And time. All right, Noah, back over to you. Final 30 seconds of the round when ready.
We're not talking about relationships. We're not talking about performances. We're talking about characters. And Ian is undoubtedly the weakest character because he won out throughout the entire film. He's selfish. He goes on this quest purely so he can spend this day with his father. He doesn't ask if Barley wants to have any time with his father. He doesn't say, hey, you go out and do these activities. He's doing it for himself. And you see that throughout the entire film. Arlo goes on this fear of conquering on this journey of conquering his fear and conquering his fear that maybe he's one who's responsible for his dad's death, and maybe he's forced into those, but that's what story is. It forces you, but you see him grow throughout the entire film, not just at 5 minutes.
And time. And Joe, over to you. Final 30 seconds.
I think our experiences and our relationships are what make characters great. I think you can have a personality and you can just stick to that personality, or you can show how experiences and relationships develop those experiences. But it's not just through the effect they have on us, it's the effect that we have on them. And when Ian realizes the effect that he's had on his brother and how he made his brother grow up and lost part of his brother's childhood because of that, I think that shows why he has to grow and why he has to accept that, because he is able to realize what his brother did for him, and then in vice versa what he did for his brother. Whereas Arlo is just going that it is a one note thing. I feel responsible for this and I'm going to try and overcome it, and I'm going to have to do it through other characters because I'm not interested enough.
And time. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring the judges in and go to the vote. Once again, when I say your name, give me who you are voting for. With that said, Nick, who gets your vote? To Joe, Chris, and Austin.
Joe.
And your winner by a final score of 4-2, Joe Hot Fuzz Farrelly.
Damn.
And that's the shot right there. All right. Well, Joe, there's no better way to make a comeback than to pull out a victory, and a hard-fought victory at that, sir. You are now 9-2 with 3 knockouts, continuing one of the most impressive records in the league, and you are back into a title match. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I said before, Noah took me to the wire last time, but my God, 2-0 down. That was tough. I really had to fight towards the end there. It's always difficult. Noah had some really good counters. Punch back, obviously, those first two ones. Those first two matches, that was my fault. I completely blanked on John Hurt when I picked, but you know, it happens. I was honestly thinking we were going to get some sort of like Tennant Smith or Capaldi McGann debate, because With Nail and I is fucking awesome. But I forgot John Hurt, and that's what happens because yeah, he's clearly got the best filmography of any Doctor Who actor. But you know, it is what it is. It was a really, really tough match. I think some of those speed rounds played thankfully into movies I'd watched recently. I watched Onward for Study. I was managing a team that had that as a deep cut movie, and I did the all night trilogy for the Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy Through the Night in IMAX, which was absolutely phenomenal. So those movies are sort of more fresh in mind and a lot easier to argue about stuff that's fresh. But yeah, if the match against Rue is anything like this, then it's going to be a barn burner.
I considering every single match Rue has played is basically a barn burner. I can't expect anything less. So obviously we've already talked about, everybody knows that you're friends with Rue. Everybody knows what type of match this is going to be. So I want to ask you something different, right? Because even when a player is perceived to be at the top of something, there's still always room for growth and improvement, right? And this match very much echoes your title match against Henry, where at the start of the game, you went down very quickly by a couple of points. And in that instance, obviously, you lost the title because you just couldn't quite work your way back far enough to get the win. You were able to do that tonight. So does that give you any sort of extra positive feeling going into this next title match?
I think it's about sometimes taking on a new stance. Like I said, there's always going to be someone that comes along that is better, no matter how good you are. Even if you're someone in any sport, any sort of thing like this, where even if you've long retired, someone's going to come on that's going to be considered better than you. I think one of those things is possibly, hoping not, is happening right now in sort of the geek trivia world, where I was at the top for a long time and I was doing very well, and now Brittany Tapley has come in. But one day, someone's going to come in that is even better than her, and that's terrifying.
Right.
So sometimes you have to adapt the game you play. And I think one of the things that was key here is that I've always tried to debate quite respectfully. And sometimes you can't do that. You have to counter with venom. Even if on your Letterboxd Drive is rated higher than Bronson. You can't say that.
That's true. That specifically, I mean, I wouldn't bother fact checking that, but that specifically is probably not something you should say. But anyways, Joe, you can say it now, yeah.
The point being is that this is a debate, and it's about finding the flaws in those movies. And every argument, every point has flaws, except maybe John Hurt's filmography. But you're going to try. And sometimes you have to lose that respect, not for your opponent, but that respect that you have for their choice.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, I think. Joe, it's awesome just in general to have you back, man. And of course, we will see you in the near future for this matchup against Amaru, a rematch as well, I believe. You guys have played before in the more recent Battleground, so it'll be interesting to see. Till then, of course, take care. We will see you next time, as we'll go ahead and drop you out to the back and bring in your opponent. And Noah, it was an excellent showing, man. Again, this is one of those instances where, like, again, somebody who's never seen a match would look at 6 and 5 and they would sort of count you out. But I think you have to look at the progression of the career and the fact that 3 of those losses are sudden death, blind round, speed round, whatever it be, to champion level players. That's no shame to lose in that sense. And as I said, there was a moment in this match where very handedly it looked like you had the upper hand. How are you feeling despite the loss coming out of this?
Disappointed, but not really. Because I felt, in terms of answers and answers alone, I felt like I had the better choices, at least for the first 4 questions. And it was just a matter of fact of arguing that and finding a way to counter anything Joe said. I felt great when I had those first 2 points, because I know it can be biased, but I clearly felt that I won those first 2 pretty handedly. And then just kind of went downhill from there, because Joe went a 4 match or 4 spree. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, he won 4 points in a row.
I just put so much prep into this, and I stressed so much about this. It feels relieving for it to be over, and I feel relieved I don't have to go through this again so soon for Rue. But I'm also like, this is a great match, and if only I had switched up my debate and prepared maybe a little bit better. And Drive, I love Drive so much, but for some reason I was having such a hard time writing about it and try to find things to say about it. And it's hard sometimes for a movie that you love so much, and a great movie that's a little bit hard to find points for, you know?
Yeah.
But Joe played great, and I think I'm resigned to say that I'm just like a mid-tier competitor, and Joe's obviously top tier, and I guess that's where we'll stay. I love competing. I love competition. I love being competitive. So that's always fun. But I feel good in my loss. But even still, losing always sucks. So
yeah, it's an inevitable feeling. Nobody likes to lose, whether you're resigned to it or whether you're not used to it. Or I mean, again, we've seen time and time before. I mean, I think especially with that monster tear he went on back in the original run of the show, I definitely spoke to competitors who had that mindset against someone like Joe, where you just kind of go, oh, fucking hell, here we go. Like, this is what it's going to be. And the biggest benefit you can give yourself is fighting that mindset, right? It is, no matter what you feel about your opponent, you have to believe to some extent that you can take a victory. And every once in a while, you will surprise yourself and take it. And you had a good game tonight. I don't think there's anything to be upset about. And I think even with the loss, you can take some momentum into your next appearance, which is going to be in our tournament later this year. You'll be taking some time off until that begins, which fair enough. But you'll be back in that tournament. Now, again, as I've said to everybody, because there are so many cards up in the air right now, I don't exactly know where everything is going to fall. But you will have a slot in that tournament should you want it. Obviously, you were in the tournament last year. You made it out of the first round in a good match and met Joe. So I guess my question to you is, are you excited that Joe won't be there?
Very, because I played him twice. I don't want to play him a third. Love you, Joe. You're a great competitor. Don't want to play you again. I'm good for right now. Same with Papa West. I played him twice. I don't want to play him again.
Well, he doesn't want to play it all again, so you're good. I took care of that one for you, no problem. With that said, though, Noah, again, a good performance tonight. Unfortunately, it went the way it went, but sometimes it's meant to be, and let's see how this tournament goes for you instead. But until then, sir, take care of yourself. We'll see you back in the future, as I'll drop you to the back. And guys, that is going to be it on the movie Battleground. Joe Farrelly, continuing his win streak, it's worth noting, because he was on a 3-game win streak at the end of the year. He's now on a 4-game win streak, looking to some extent, despite his own opinion on how he felt he performed in the tournament. He got 2 knockouts. He's on a 4-game win streak. He is looking like the Joe of old to some extent, and I don't think there's a better person to try and take on Rue, especially after Rue got those 2 defenses, and that is the blockbuster match to promote, because our next title match will be defending champion Amaru Moses versus Joe Farrelly. If Rue can win this match, he will defend the title 3 times, which is more than his previous opponent, Henry, was able to. If Joe can win it, he would become, I believe, the first 3-time champ in the history of the show. And that's not just new history. That's new and old history. I believe there was at least one other person who was 2-time champ before, but there has never been a 3-time champion. So that's what Joe is shooting for. And it's going to be a hell of a match. When I say definitively we have the number 1 and number 2 players in the league playing each other, I think I mean it this time around. Not that I haven't meant it in the past, but it's definitive at this point. So we will see how it goes. With that said, thank you all for watching. Congratulations to Joe. Thank you once again to Noah for playing his heart out and competing here. Thank you to my judges, Chris, Austin, Nick, for doing a great job tonight. And on behalf of everybody at Movie Battleground, I will see you guys next time. Take care.